Welcome into Ravens Rundown by Chat Sports. I am Tom Downey, and we are having a month-long like challenge here at Chat Sports. And I regret to inform you that producer Jeremy, Tyler Jones, they're getting their butt kicked. So I have been brought in, the ringer, to help get some more likes on this channel. The Ravens are behind the Browns, Steelers, Seahawks, Chiefs, and the Eagles. Most of those teams are not actually all that great, and two of them are in the AFC North. So let's get that changed. Like the video right now. Tom Downey here for Ravens Rundown. We're talking trade in large part on today's show, including the latest going on with one Lamar Jackson. Now, I'm sure you know by now that Lamar showed up to minicamp. He said he'll probably be there at training camp, and he wants to be a Raven. He thinks a deal will get done, and the team keeps saying that they want to work out a new deal. And yet, we're not really making any progress, which is highly unusual for this to be the path that has gone down so far for the Ravens and for their franchise QB. There was even a report from ESPN that they were glad that Lamar was back in the facility because they could finally talk to him about the contract since he has no agent. It's a very unusual situation and not exactly ideal either. Now, to be clear, I do not think the Ravens trade Lamar Jackson. Neither does ESPN, as Jamison Hensley explored the potential options with the Ravens. We know most of them pay Lamar big money, blah, blah, blah. Here was the trade side of it per ESPN. Quote, "Let's be clear. This is not an option the team has even hinted about. Ravens officials have repeatedly talked about how Jackson is their quarterback for the future. But there would be a decision to make if Baltimore puts the franchise tag on Jackson next year, which would start the 2-year clock before he reaches free agency. It's difficult to believe the Ravens would watch Jackson sign elsewhere in 2025 with getting only a third-round comp pick for him," which is all true. And this would be the, wow, Lamar just doesn't want to be here route, which, again, I don't think is the case. Let's look at this graphic. This is the potential contract cost if no deal is met. 2022, we know Lamar is going to make $23.02 million. The 2023 franchise tag is set and projected to be, I should say not set, but projected to be $31.5 million. The 2024 tag is $37.8 million. That is 120% of the previous year's tag if it's not surpassed by a new one, which it really wouldn't be. 2025 is 144% of the previous year's tag. We balloon above $50 million at that point. That's a lot of money. And that's mostly guaranteed as long as you don't get hurt or do something terrible to lose out on your guaranteed franchise tag stuff. For the Ravens, they want to pay Lamar because those numbers you saw, those are not adjustable. All these current dudes you see on screen, Rodgers, Watson, Mahomes, Allen, all their salary cap hits are way, way lower than their per-year money because you backload it, add some fake years, add some void years, keep the most important positions salary cap hit low while you allow yourself to be contenders. Then once they're retired, you enter your rebuilding phase anyway. So in theory, this next question, by the way, we see a bunch of ours. And I think that's what ends up happening. The Ravens re-sign Lamar Jackson, and he balls out as he's done for pretty much all of his NFL career, despite what the haters and losers might say. But what do you think ends up happening? Where will Lamar Jackson sign? R for the Ravens, O for an other team ends up adding him. This is the pinned comment on today's video. You know the drill. Ad break comes on YouTube. Take advantage of it. Head down there, type in your R's. Didn't give an option for O there. Kenny Golladay trade next up, as Bleacher Report explored several different Golladay trade ideas, including one that ships him off to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Giants would save $13.25 million with a trade, which is pretty significantly different than if they were to cut him, which would come in at right about $0.25 million. So no real money on that standpoint there. A new team would owe Golladay roughly 3 years, $50 million. There's nothing guaranteed after the 2022 campaign. The problem they run into is there's also a $4 million roster bonus that I think was paid out, but roster bonus payouts can be a little bit weird. when we're already in June. It was supposed to be paid out, might be paid as the year goes on. It's always a bit murky from that standpoint, so we'll call it about $50 million. Here was Bleacher Report's trade idea to get Golladay to the Giants, or from the Giants. Nick Boyle to New York and a 6th-round pick as well. I don't know if I believe the Nick Boyle deal since they just restructured his deal, which should save $1.12 million. If you are convinced Golladay can return to his Lions form, it does make some sense. That's not a guarantee. So we'll break this down more in depth momentarily. But would you trade for Kenny Golladay? Type in T for trade, or you can type in P for pass. Let me know which route you would pursue when it comes to the former number 1 wide receiver. I said former because he is former. 2018, 2019. Golladay was awesome for the Lions. 65 catches, 75 catches, over 1,000 yards. Fantasy touchdown machine in 2019. Injured a lot in 2020. Okay, that's fine. His production this past year in 2021 fell off a cliff, and not in a good way given how much he actually did play. 76 targets. He caught only 37 of them. 521 yards, yes, offers some good size, decent ability, blah, blah, blah. 0 touchdowns. He was a shell of the guy we saw in 2019. And with the Giants' depth at receiver, they restructured the deal of Sterling Shepard. They drafted Kadarius Toney round 1 last year. Wan'Dale Robinson round 2 this year. Darius Slayton is a vertical threat for them, who is also potentially a trade target for the Ravens. You could see why New York would love to find a buy low trade partner to get that contract off their books. The Ravens have invested next to nothing from a money perspective in the wide receiver room. This is actually one of the cheapest receiving cores in the entire NFL because you got 1st-round pick Rashad Bateman and then 3rd-round picks, 4th-round picks, UDFAs, etc. Bateman can be an outside receiver. I'm curious if they viewed can Devin Duvernay play that role this upcoming year. What about Tylan Wallace? James Prochet's a slot. If Duvernay, Prochet, and Wallace can be on your team, no doubts about it. But do we trust them as 2, 3, 4 in some order, or would we feel better if they were 3, 4, 5? I feel better about the latter. The question is Golladay going to return to form? Depending on how much maybe the Giants could eat of the contract, maybe you could meet halfway to get that deal off the books for them and get you a receiver. That could make some sense. If there is a trade, we've got one more rumor at receiver coming up, by the way. Hit that big red button and subscribe because we will break it down. Non-stop Ravens coverage for free here at Ravens Rundown. There's no reason not to subscribe. Scotty Miller next up here. Probably doesn't know how to spell his own name. Bleacher Report suggested the Ravens trade for Miller, and that is because they have all of the receivers. The Bucs wide receiver room is one of the deepest in the entire NFL, and Scotty Miller, a punt return slot receiver, might be the odd man out. So Bleacher Report's trade idea was this: a 5th-round pick in exchange for, which in a bubble is, I think, actually a little bit on the high side from a value perspective. I don't think Miller's that impactful to justify a true 5th-round pick. But here was Bleacher Report's argument. Miller's lack of impact was shocking, considering the success he found with Tom Brady in their first year together. The speedy 5'9", 174 receiver averaged 174-pounder, averaged 15.2 yards per catch, a total of 501 yards and 3 scores in 2020. He stuck behind the deepest wide receiving core in the league, but would catch on quickly in Baltimore with the ability to get open quickly. Baltimore opted against adding another quality receiver despite moving Marquise Brown during the NFL draft, creating a mass hole that Miller could fill for a much cheaper price. I don't know if I truly believe that. Miller is a burner. He offers sub 4.4 speed. He still feels like more of a slot receiver to me just because of the size involved, but the speed gives him at least the ability to be a potential vertical threat. So I go back and forth on how useful he could be for the Ravens in particular because they have speed on this team. James Prochet is not slow. Devin Duvernay is certainly not slow either. And Miller last year was mostly outside, some slot. 2020, when he had that big-time year, he was mostly outside, some slot, but you've got undersized, speedy receivers already on this team. So it's a tricky potential fit, and I don't know how much better he is than Devin Duvernay. So because of the lack of size, I would actually have more interest in Golladay of the two. But what do you think? Do the Ravens need to trade for a wide receiver? Y for yes, N for no. Sound off for me in the comments section.